about that so much. But I started thinking about it, and then I started to think about his death, and then I just decided we should do an episode on it.
Cool.
So that's the long preamble.
You know what? One thing that in doing a little research on this is I'm amazed at how long it's been since he died. It doesn't seem that 22
94.
years. Yeah.
It seems like a long time because I remember it.
Yeah, I remember it too, but it just doesn't seem like it was that long ago.
Yeah, because it wasn't. I mean,
Joe, that's because we're old.
You guys
Oh,
are
is that
old.
what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
And time does fly.
I don't remember it because I was too young to remember it, but I was alive at least, so there's that. And then, as an additional preamble to this is a huge case. Like, huge. Lots of research has been done on it. And that's not to say that the rest of the cases we do are not huge, but this one is extra huge. And I just want to remind anybody or let people know if they don't know, our podcast is intended as a primer course or an overview of cases. So there are going to be things that we're going to gloss over or we're going to omit or that we won't include in the episode. And that's just how it is. I'm sorry.
No, we'll get the important stuff in.
I think we do usually get the important stuff, but if your only point of context for this is like the Soaked in Bleach documentary on Netflix, or it's only Kurt and Courtney, also on Netflix, or you've never heard of it, I encourage you to do more research because this isn't everything. It's just
There's
not.
a ton of content.
There's a ton out there.
I mean, it's a celebrity, so therefore the story is on the scale of reflective of the scale of that celebrity, and so that's why there's so much out there.
Yeah. So I just wanted to remind people before we get into it, we're gonna miss things. Sorry, but we're gonna miss things.
I don't think we missed any important things.
I don't think so either, but I'm sure that everybody has their favorite detail.
Mm-hmm.
So we might miss it, and I'm sorry if we do, but we probably know that we did. Okay?
Okay.
Cool.
Sweet.
Belabored that point long enough.
You did.
All right. So, first off, like we did with Bob Marley, I'd like to assume that everybody knows who Kurt Cobain is, but I guess I probably can't. Do you guys remember the 90s?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
vaguely.
yeah.
I remember some of the 90s. And there was, especially in the Pacific Northwest, the 90s grunge era was taking effect.
Oh, yeah.
And a large part of that was in thanks to a band called Nirvana.
I'm wearing plaid.
You are.
Green plaid.
You are. I'm impressed.
Yeah,
I'm not actually impressed you wear plaid frequently, but
Thanks.
you're welcome.
Damn it.
Yeah. But you guys know Nirvana. You know Nirvana. You do.
Oh, yeah.
If you think you don't know who Nirvana is, just pause this episode and go look up Nirvana and just listen to any song that comes up and you will recognize Nirvana.
I was really surprised though when I was doing the research. I didn't realize they'd only put out 3 albums. For as big as they were, for some reason in my mind, I figured it was a half dozen.
Well, that's the interesting part, right? They became so ubiquitous so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really, it was insane. I mean, as soon as the radio picked up Smells Like Teen Spirit, they just became
They
huge.
were in.
And almost every song off of their albums were hits.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't like one of those albums you pick up now where you recognize one song. It was just all of them are popular songs. So Kurt Cobain was the front for Nirvana. And there's a ton of history in the band, and I won't go into it, but you should probably look it up because bands and music are interesting and awesome. Cobain was, I'm not making this up, this is an actual quote. He was called, quote, the spokesman of a generation.
Which generation?
Gen X.
Gen X.
Okay.
Generation.
Gen X,
Thank you.
Yeah.
He and Nirvana rose quickly in popularity, as we were mentioning, and Nirvana to this day is regarded as one of the most influential and important rock bands of the modern era. I know that sounds like a bold statement,
No, they're pretty
but it's
influential.
true. Yeah. It's possible you also know of Dave Grohl, or at very least the Foo Fighters. Again, yeah, you do. Go look it up.
Yeah.
Grohl was the drummer for Nirvana.
I totally had spaced that out when I was doing the reading. Why is his name all over the stuff? Oh, yeah. Whoops.
Yeah. So, Cobain, huge influence on music. Pretty much everything that is modern rock. I said it. Deal with it.
We're going to get a lot of emails.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get a lot of emails regardless.
Regardless, yeah. And actually, I guess, so before we go too far into the mystery is that Kurt Cobain committed suicide on April 5th, 1994 at the age of 27, arguably at the height of his career. I mean,
Just
you know,
beginning
he
it,
could
really.
have, yeah, he could have.
Putting him into the 27 Club.
Yeah, he was part of the 27 Club. But a lot of people think that he was actually murdered. He didn't actually kill himself. So that's our mystery. Did Kurt Cobain commit suicide or not? And if I really have to say it, it's a suicide story. So if that's a thing that bothers you, stop now.
Yeah.
Okay?
Suicide bothers me, so I'm going to go.
Okay.
Yeah, see ya.
Bye. Steve, you ready?
Yeah.
Great. Let's go back to important characters. Let's start with that, right? In January of 1990, Kurt met Portland local and frontwoman for the band that I think it's safe to say most people haven't actually heard of, called Hole. And her name was Courtney Love.
Did Hole really form in 90? I thought they formed later.
No. Hole was... I'm sorry. I'm just saying Hole, like, that's where you would know Courtney Love from.
Oh, okay.
But
Not that
Hole-
the band formed in 90.
I think they were.
They
by
might have.
then.
I think you know I think it was later on that they were starting to like get bigger. Maybe,
Okay.
but
And that
I think
might be
I think
where
they
I-
had been around since
Okay.
Yeah.
90 or maybe even earlier than that.
Also, it's unfair to say that nobody's heard of Hole. You've probably heard Hole songs. You just don't know it. It was a joke. I'm sorry. It's also not 100% sure that that's where they met, but it doesn't really matter. They probably met in Portland.
I know he played a lot of gigs in Portland.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Well, they were from Seattle. Yeah.
Yeah. Courtney Love is probably like one of the most ridiculed celebrities of all times ever, I would say.
Yeah.
She has habitually abused drugs and alcohol. She has had lots of legal trouble as well. A few months after Cobain's death, Love actually punched someone at Lollapalooza, which started a string of arrests. And she was banned from a lot of places, including Virgin Airlines, like the entire airline. She was no longer allowed to fly with them.
How'd you manage to do that?
She assaulted a stewardess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In
I'll get
a
the band.
typical Courtney Love fashion.
Kinda, yeah. I will say this, that despite her substance abuse problems prior to Cobain's death, it seems that her legal problems at least were really spurred by his death. She didn't really have many legal problems before he died. And that, you know, she wasn't arrested or anything like that. They seemed like a pretty normal couple, you know, as normal as you can be in the famous 90s grunge era. They got married in February of 92. Love wore a lace and satin wedding dress, and Cobain wore green pajamas.
A nice touch.
Yeah. And Love was pregnant at the time when they were married, and she gave birth to their only child, whose name is Frances Bean, in August of 1992.
Did either of you guys look at pictures of Frances?
I think she's beautiful.
I was really surprised at how much she looked like her mom.
Yeah.
For some reason, this is dumb, but I expected her to look more like her father, and it was shocking to see a sober version or clean version of Courtney.
She has Kurt's eyes, though.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
Really, really piercing blue eyes.
Yeah, what's Francis up to these days, anyway?
She's an artist.
Oh,
She's getting a divorce.
oh really?
She is. She's getting a divorce.
Got it.
Tom Grant is another important player in this whole thing. Most of the time you'll hear Grant referred to as an exemplary man, at least definitely in his own documentaries. He was a detective in LA, and then he retired and became a private detective. Definitely been the loudest proponent of the Cobain murder theory.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He was hired by Love on April 3rd, 1994, after Cobain escaped from a rehab facility in LA on March 31st. And we're going to talk about the whole series of events in a minute, so the important people, so that when we're going through, I don't have to pause to say all that stuff. Grant almost immediately started recording almost literally every conversation and event that happened around this case. He's thousands of hours of recordings, and many of the conversations that he taped were with a woman by the name of Rosemary Carroll, who was the entertainment lawyer for Courtney and Kurt both. The interesting thing about Rosemary Carroll is that in recordings, she very clearly agrees with Grant about most of his theories. but refuses to go on the record of any kind to say those things. In fact, in one of the recordings, you can hear her agreeing with Grant, and then she goes, "Wait, are you recording?" And he says, "I record everything." And she goes, "You can't do that. Stop." And he stops the recording. She says a couple other words that we don't say on our podcast.
Oh, when she discovers that she's being recorded. Yes, she does say a few choice
other
words.
Things. Yeah. This might confuse people, her refusal to go on the record, but it doesn't really confuse me that much. Courtney Love is still her client.
She's a lawyer.
She's a lawyer, and her firm represents people like Jay-Z, for instance. It's a big firm of big talent, and you can't go around accusing your clients of murder in the public if you want to retain any of your clients.
Or to have any in the future.
Yeah. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you can even be disbarred for saying stuff like that.
It seems like you probably could.
Yeah.
I don't really know. Anyway,
slander.
So you'll hear that tossed around a lot, but I just want to go on the record as saying it doesn't really bother me that much that she won't go on the record. Okay, those are the big ones. Big three, with a couple extras.
Well, there's a few other guys in there, like
but we'll
Dylan,
talk about those, yeah. Talk about those when we get there. Timeline? Let's talk about timeline.
All right.
We're just going to do a series of events here. And we're actually going to start a little earlier than April. We're going to start in early March of 1994. In Germany, Nirvana was on tour in Europe, I should say. And in Germany, Cobain was diagnosed with bronchitis and severe laryngitis.
Makes it kind of tough to sing.
It does, yeah. So
even when, sometimes his singing was more screaming, but it's still tough to do.
Still, you just can't do it. I mean, you have to be able to produce noise.
Yes.
That doesn't really work if you've got laryngitis or bronchitis.
That's why you just whack the mic on things. Makes noise.
It does. I don't think it's really Nirvana style, but maybe.
Oh, yeah, you got a point.
Yeah. It was more the guitars smashing than anything.
Bingo.
Yeah. As you can imagine, Kurt decided to get treatment for said bronchitis and laryngitis. So he flew to Rome for treatment because why not? If you have a lot of money, you may as well go to Rome for treatment instead of staying in Germany. I don't know.
Probably much nicer.
Well, it turns out that Courtney Love, I'm going to try to refer to people by their last names, but I might forget. But Love really, really likes Roman history, so I suspect there might have been something there that he thought, oh, well, maybe she'll come with me if I go hang out in Rome or something like that.
Yeah, you know what I heard about that? Heard that about her. I thought that's kind of surprised me.
Yeah,
it was surprising to me too. You're not the only one, Joe.
Yeah.
I did not imagine that.
There is a side to Courtney Love that we didn't know about.
Yeah. Well, Courtney Love did join him in Rome, in fact, and on March 3rd, Cobain had, according to Love, gone all out. He'd gotten her flowers. He had champagne ready. He was basically super cute, excited, and romantic. He even apparently got her a piece of the Colosseum because apparently, she loves Roman history.
So he went down to the Colosseum with his hammer and
Yeah,
chisel.
They sell that stuff, man.
They do.
I know.
Yeah.
And it probably isn't actually from the Colosseum. Okay, sorry.
When she arrived, Love says they opened the champagne and she popped a Valium because stress, I guess. And they made out a little bit and then she fell asleep.
What a horrible day.
Yeah. And I think, that would upset me.
Well, it would, but didn't she fly in from the States?
Yeah.
Wouldn't she have horrible jet lag in addition to
it depends on
taking
when
the Valium?
she... Oh, you mean that so she would have fallen asleep anyway because she would have been really, really tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends on when she flew, but yeah, I mean, Valium will knock you out.
It will.
And so I don't know why she did that. I would be annoyed if my husband showed up in Rome and I hadn't seen him for a long time and I was being really romantic and then he was just like, okay, bye, and sleep.
Yeah.
I'd be annoyed. I can see that. Yeah. So around 4 a.m., she woke up from her Valium-induced coma, apparently, to find Cobain passed out on the floor and he was rushed to the hospital. He had apparently overdosed on Rohypnol, which you probably know as roofies, which there aren't actually intended for date rape stuff. They're actually just sleep aids, and it was Love's prescription that he had taken some of her pills, and she very famously says that there were that he had taken 50 pills.
I want to know why the heck she had 50 of them on her.
Well, I mean, Why not? I mean, what do you usually get as a prescription of something? 25,
30?
50?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that 50 is an excessive number, is just
Well,
what I'm saying.
Also, she was drug addict. So.
Yeah, she had good drug collection.
She did have
probably
good
bought
connections.
everything in quantity.
Yeah. But the overdose was so bad that Cobain was actually in a coma. And I can't tell from the reporting on this if he was in a coma for 5 days or he was just actually in the hospital for 5 days. I also can't tell if he was actually in a coma or he was just unconscious, but that's
Like
neither
short
here nor
duration
there.
in a coma and then was awake.
He was definitely in the hospital for 5 days.
Yeah.
No matter what was happening in the hospital, he was there. You'll hear this referred to as Cobain's first suicide attempt, but it's really important to delineate here that no one at the time, doctors included, thought that it was a suicide attempt. Everybody classified it as a totally accidental overdose, and nobody thought it was a suicide attempt.
No, it wasn't until she reclassified.
It wasn't until Cobain died that it started being referred to as a suicide attempt.
Yep.
That's important.
Yep.
Yeah. There's also some speculation that the reason that Cobain had so many roofies in his system is that Love put a bunch of pills in his champagne, and so he was unknowingly drinking roofies as well as taking roofies. I don't know if I believe that or not, especially since I don't know how much he had in his body.
I was going to say, we don't know any dosages.
No.
Well, it also
Or how
doesn't
much
make
is
any
consumed.
sense. I mean, if she wanted to kill him, then why would she rush him to the hospital?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my other big thing with saying, oh, she was trying to kill him.
That was her first try.
It was like, no, because she would not have called an ambulance if
She'd have
she
taken
would have
another
waited.
Valium and gone back to bed.
She would have waited, yeah, and then she could have come to and been like, oh my god, I woke up at 9 o'clock this morning and he was dead.
Exactly.
Ugh. Anyway, I don't believe that this was a murder or suicide attempt. I believe it was totally just an accidental overdose. But that's just my, opinion, man.
Yeah.
Cobain and Love returned to Seattle after he spent 5 days in the hospital in Rome, which I'm just now realizing I never said is where they lived. They lived in Seattle, Washington.
Yeah, they had
They
a
owned
nice
a house.
house there.
It was a nice little house, yeah.
It wasn't little.
No.
Oh, it's like-
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
didn't mean actually little. It's a
It's
nice,
not. That
nice
was
house.
actually for as wealthy as they were, though. It was actually more modest than a lot of rock stars would live in, and but still a pretty big house.
Seattle is not known for, unlike places like LA, for having that many huge, lavish homes
Yeah.
at that time. Now,
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
to say that's the case now, but at that time, they weren't as many giant, sprawling, gold-encrusted homes.
Yeah. On March 18th, Love called the police claiming that Cobain was suicidal and had locked himself in a room with a gun. The police came, they confiscated the guns and some pills, but when they asked Cobain why he was behaving that way, he said he wasn't suicidal at all, but he was hiding from Courtney. And this is actually in the literal police report. I don't know if you guys saw that link that I posted, but it literally says that in the police report that he was scared of Courtney and he was hiding from her with a gun in the room.
I have heard the stuff that has come out of that woman's mouth before, and I would have hid in the bathroom too, because she's a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs at
Well,
times.
he was a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs too at sometimes. I
Yeah.
mean, there are some recordings of him threatening.
Oh yeah, no. I'm not saying that he was stable.
Yeah.
I'm saying she is definitely unstable.
Definitely unstable, yeah. So, again, you'll hear that also referred to as a suicide attempt. Obviously, it was not, given that the police report proves that it was not. Or, I mean, at the very least, that he was aware enough to say, no, it's not. I don't really know. Again, I don't think he was trying to kill himself at that moment either, but there you go. On March 25th, Love staged an intervention with 10 of Cobain's friends and some record executives, which I think is pretty funny.
Yeah, we did mention that he was a heroin addict, right?
Oh, probably not.
No,
Yeah.
we haven't actually mentioned
You're right.
that
Good.
specifics
Thank you for
yet.
pointing that out. This is one of those instances where you get so caught up in the case you forget to say things that seem really obvious to you.
That
but
are so basic,
are totally
That
basic.
are totally important.
Yeah. Both Courtney and Kurt were really, really heavy heroin users throughout the entire duration of their relationship
And prior to.
and prior to.
In fact, I think it was Courtney that said it was drugs that brought them together.
I think,
That was
yeah.
their major shared interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was a heavy heroin user. So was she. They both used a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a lot of stuff out there talking about how Cobain embraced his identity as a drug addict. That was like attractive to him, that he was doing drugs. So, take that as you will.
Yeah.
For those of you familiar with the case, Dylan Carlson was at the intervention. I am consciously omitting a lot of stuff that you will see about Dylan around on the internet about this case.
Okay.
Because I just think that they're not even a little suspicious the way he was acting. And I think that it adds a lot of fluff to the case to discuss Dylan as some nefarious character.
Yeah, I don't think he was all that nefarious. And by the way, just for those of you who aren't aware of the case, Dylan Carlson was a childhood friend of Kurt Cobain's.
Mm-hmm.
They were best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they did drugs together.
Oh, yeah.
He was totally a heroin user.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, that is the other reason I'm not opposed to not bringing him up every 10 seconds, like some of the places that you'll read about this story does, is because he was also a junkie, and his behavior is very, very typical. The things that he says and the way that he acts. So I can't see putting a lot of faith into the guy.
Yeah. I don't think it's suspicious. If you want to know what we're kind of talking about, again, we're kind of talking about Soaked in Bleach and the way that they portray Dylan Carlson, as well as Tom Grant, the way he portrays Dylan as kind of a seedy, nefarious guy in this whole thing.
He was colluding with them.
Yeah, so I'm not going to bring him up every 10 seconds like a lot of people do when they talk about this case, and I just wanted to bring that up now. I'll bring him up when it's important, like again in a couple minutes, but it's not important right now. Okay, so after a rough start, likely Cobain laughing in Courtney's face, right?
Probably.
Because I can't imagine that she was sober during this whole thing. Saying, you need to go to rehab, and I'm going to go with you, but I'm not going to do the inpatient thing. I'm going to stay in a hotel, and you go be in that other... Obviously, she wasn't
calling
saying
the
that.
kettle black?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was her idea, right?
And after a rough start, as I said, they eventually did convince Cobain that he should go to rehab.
Yeah, you got a daughter now, right, dude?
Yeah, and, you know...
got responsibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I want to know is, why did they have to go all the way to L.A. for rehab?
I think it's probably one of the best. It probably also caters to celebrities.
I was going to say, it's their status is most likely. You don't go to the local...
To the methadone clinic down the street.
Yeah.
Or Method 1, as the case may be. Sorry, joking. Okay, so Love and Cobain agreed to go to this one in LA, right? And as I vaguely mentioned, Cobain was going to stay... It was a facility you were supposed to stay in. It was supposed to be an inpatient detox, which makes sense for heavy drug users. You would want to monitor literally everything they do.
Kind of lock them up for a few days.
Yeah. But apparently, Courtney was staying in a hotel, maybe even with her drug dealer for her quote unquote treatment.
Yeah, she never seemed to take.
She didn't seem to
cleaning
take it
up.
seriously. Yeah.
Seriously. I mean, she did eventually clean up, and she's fallen off the wagon quite a few times. Some of them very famously, but this is one of those times where I don't think she was taking it seriously at all.
I would agree with that.
I think, and these days, you guys have probably noticed that she's really tried to clean up her image also. Her whole style has changed.
She's trying very hard.
Yeah, but unfortunately, she's not always gone about it so well. Did you see that roast she was on a couple of years ago?
No.
No.
Oh, she was on some celebrity roast, and she's like, I am so clean, and I haven't done anything in so long. And it is so obvious that she is blasted. And like a week and a half later, she went into another program because the entire internet was like, you're lying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she's trying. She's not always succeeding, but she's trying.
Well, and here's what I'll say. When I was doing research from this, and we'll talk about some of the experts or people I talked to when we start talking about theories, but I did talk to some people who are ex-addicts who are listeners of our show, and they said, by and large, opiate addiction, heroin addiction is the hardest thing to kick. It's the thing you miss the most. That high is just like, it's almost impossible to kick for your entire life. And if you're around people who are doing it, you're probably going to start doing it again.
That's Courtney's problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that she's surrounded by the wrong people.
Right, yeah.
Whether that's intentional or not.
Yeah. So she didn't really take this whole detox thing seriously, it sounds like.
Neither did Kurt, I guess.
Neither did Kurt, yeah. And reports say that the facility in LA had, quote, no knowledge of his history of depression or previous suicide attempts, unquote, which is funny, again, because as far as I can tell, he didn't have any suicide attempts. But maybe he did, I don't know.
He did have some history of depression, didn't he?
Yeah, but I mean...
He had some
Let's be
medical
fair.
issues that kind of drug him down and gave him an excuse for a lot of things.
Yeah, although there's some
a lot of
discussion
speculation on that,
about
too.
Yeah, there's some speculation there. But I mean, like, really, who doesn't have a history of depression? You know, who doesn't feel depressed when they're a teenager? You know, and it's not as though Kurt was that much. I mean, he was 27, but if you're living in a world where you're making music about feeling angry and mad and sad and doing a lot of drugs, that's probably just going to continue. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. On March 30th...
This is 5 days after the intervention.
Yes. Cobain goes with Dylan Carlson to buy a shotgun before leaving for rehab. You'll remember that the police confiscated all of his guns, all of Cobain's guns.
Yeah, was he under some sort of restraining order? Because I got the impression that Dylan Carlson bought the gun for him.
He did. He wasn't under a restraining order. He told Dylan that he didn't want to buy a gun because he thought the police would find out and confiscate that one too.
Oh, I got you.
Given that it was registered under his name.
After they just seized all of his weapons.
Guns. Yeah. So he asked Dylan to buy it for him because he thought that it's unclear. Reports are either that he thought somebody was like breaking into his house, or that a decision that he was about to make, which I'll tell you about in a second, he thought that people would be really angry and come attack him because he was going to cost people a lot of money.
Retaliation, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I understand this is a 20-gauge shotgun, right?
It's a 20-gauge shotgun with a barrel break at the end.
Yeah, muzzle brake.
20-gauge Remington semi-auto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but...
semi-auto is important.
But that was a funny thing, too. I heard he said that he bought a 20-gauge because he thought he could shoot somebody with a 20-gauge and it wouldn't kill them, you know, as opposed to a 12-gauge.
Well...
And...
that's an incorrect assumption.
That's kind of funny, dude.
But I thought I read somewhere that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I may be, that 20 gauges are popular for home protection because they won't go through a wall.
Well,
you can shoot somebody and it won't go through a wall and hit somebody through a wall.
Well, it depends on what kind of load you got in it. If you got a slug in it, it might punch its way through a wall.
Or if it's birdshot, probably not.
Birdshot, no. Yeah, that's why people, you know, for home defense use smaller pellets that won't go through a wall.
Right. So that was my understanding, was that it was optimal. You know, likely they went into the gun store and they said, "What are you looking for?" He said, "Well, I'm looking to defend my home." And they said, "Oh, this is an excellent option for that." Here.
Oh, definitely.
You know what's even better than bird pellet? Just use rock salt. That doesn't kill anybody, and it hurts like hell.
Yeah, that's true.
But they don't sell that.
No, they
You
don't.
got to make your own.
You gotta make your own. That's the one problem with it.
Yeah.
I wonder what it'd be like to be shot with rock salt.
I don't want to know. I have been told that it is extremely painful.
I'll bet.
I don't want to ever find out.
Yeah. So Dylan bought Cobain this gun. I mentioned briefly that he thought maybe there would be some retaliation. It's because apparently Cobain had decided that Nirvana was not going to play Lollapalooza, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Lollapalooza is a huge
it's a giant music festival.
Yeah, and it was happening in Washington that year.
And they were going to make...
make $9.2 million in
Tons of money.
1994.
That would have made his band base rather angry.
It sounds like he not only didn't want to play Lollapalooza, but in fact wanted to disband Nirvana and quit the music business entirely. So he seemed to be a bit nervous about that. He was scared of retaliation, and so those are the two reasons that are given as to why he felt like he needed a gun. But either way, he took the gun back to his house in Seattle. He left it there. And then he got on a plane to LA and checked into the detox facility down in LA. Exodus Detox Facility. He spent the day apparently talking to counselors about his drug use, his life in general. He played with Frances, his daughter.
Was she in rehab too?
She was not. No. She came to visit him, and I think with the nanny, and I believe that then they had a new nanny down in LA, because they did have this one live-in nanny named Callie.
Well, he was still back up in Seattle,
He was still
right?
in Seattle, yeah. And they had apparently just they had had a nanny leave them like a month before.
They went through nannies like
They
toilet
did.
paper.
They really did. But I think that this nanny's name was Elizabeth.
Okay.
That's my guess, given some other stuff, but I can't actually corroborate that, so sorry, guys, if I'm wrong. Also, of note, none of the counselors seemed concerned that he was a risk for self-harm or anything like that, which seems like the sort of thing you might be able to tell if somebody was really suicidal.
I would
and you talk
imagine
to
the
them for a
counselors
day.
would be good at picking that up pretty quick, yeah.
Seems like it, but maybe I'm just ignorant.
So you're not getting their fix of heroin and all that, and their life probably sucks.
Yeah.
So he might have seemed depressed.
He
But
didn't.
probably most of the guys they bring in there were kind of down.
Well, it
You
didn't.
meet them on one of their worst days.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't actually seem like